I don't know how many of you go online and see what Bruce puts out with the lesson, but sounds like we have quite a few. And I think everybody needs to give him a hand clap for doing that today. You know, you put it out on Wednesday or something, and then you got going out Tuesday, then it started going out Monday. Now sometimes it comes out Sunday afternoon, so he's really on top.
No
of
cowboy
it.
game.
No cowboy game.
I have a question about that. Are all of your lessons like grouped in a folder or?
No, you go
Because I've
to
done some-
morallifegroup.com and it lists all of them for 2022.
Okay.
There's a column for last year's, and they're all out there, so you can go through and pick one
Okay, thank
or
you.
two or three. Yeah, that's makes it. We use it. We use YouTube to pass it on, and a lot of people just scanning through YouTube bump into these lessons out there.
Well, and that's what I've done, but then there are old lessons rather than the current, which I was looking for.
Yeah.
And so that's a question I've been meaning to ask.
Yeah, morallifegroup.com, and you can see the titles and the dates, and
Okay.
they're in date order, so, yeah.
She's wanting to binge watch.
Yeah.
Well, I might, because, this is getting travel season.
Yeah,
So-
well, we had one that I did about 5 years ago, and it's only 6 minutes long. And the title says, Death and What's Extra, What's After, I think the way I put it. And you go and do that, look at that one on YouTube. It's had 75,000 hits on that. And
Well,
I
you
put
did
it
that
to,
just recently, didn't you?
I go in every once in a while and I hit it and that brings it back up and it starts over again. So if nobody's reading it, it's bumped down and down further, so I can go in there and click it, open it up, look at it, close it, now it's back up at the top. So that's what we do.
75,000, that's impressive.
Well, the church has changed their, the way they do, I usually watch the sermon on Saturday night. And so now you go to YouTube, it's on YouTube, the sermon, the live streaming.
Oh, that's new. And then- yeah, okay, that's good. It's a good way to get the lesson out there. Okay,
Look and see.
oh no. Amber alert.
Here.
Pop up! Quiz! You didn't expect that word, did you? You were thinking we were going somewhere to eat.
I thought that was another 11-year-old kidnapped.
Yeah, to go in Amber alert. Forgetting.
Okay, so that's it, March 22nd.
Okay, well, I'm gonna make it true or false, and so you can kind of refresh yourself as we do these
What do I do with it?
true and false questions on here.
Pass it to Bruce.
Is it true or false that one rotation of the Earth on its axis is 1 week?
False.
How many say true? How many say false?
What?
How many didn't raise your hand at all? Majority. It's up to you. I'm not gonna call on anybody, but y'all can tell. So what is it called?
Okay.
1 day, right?
Tell them that next Sunday.
Earth axis. So you got that right. Try knowing. The Hebrew calendar is always 12 months.
False.
False, yeah. They fall 11 days short. They had 354 when you do 2930, 2930. And the high priest, he makes the decision if he's going to add an extra month, month 13. If he's going to add this year or next year or the year after. But they never get it totally in line. That's the inaccuracy of the Hebrew calendar. So you're right, that was false. The United States uses the Gregorian calendar.
True.
Are you sure?
No.
I just threw that in. It is true. But I just wanted to see if you would hold on. You didn't quite hold on. Well, you got a 50-50 chance on all this. The Hebrew calendar is based on the sun. Sure?
Yes.
What is it based on? Yeah, that was a good one. Yeah. The Hebrew calendar always has 29 or 30 days in their calendar.
True.
That's true.
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 They're mixed up. True. Even if they add a 13th month, it has to be either 29 or 30 days. So you don't have only those two numbers out there, 29 and 30. Easter is the first Sunday after Passover.
True.
Oh, Don, you're back here giving me trouble again. Why is it false, Don?
Because it all depends upon when the spring equinox is. And it's always on March 21st.
This is the short answer. Remember, we had a long answer and short? This is correct. It's always, if somebody asks you, when is Easter? Sometimes it's April and sometimes it's March. How do we know? It's the first Sunday after Passover. Trying to plot out when Passover is, that's the problem. That's the hard answer when you get into that. So, yeah, that part's true. Passover is always on the earth every 29 days. Nobody gonna stick to that now?
I'll say false.
That's a good guess. You have a 50-50 chance. So the question is, why is it false? Oh, I taught that last Sunday, y'all all slept through it. The problem is the moon orbits the earth 29 and a half days every time. And so those half days they can't do it, so 29 and then 30. Well, that would make it even then, 29 and 30. But when you get to the bottom of the 12th month, you add them all up, it only comes to 354 days. So they're 11 days short. So the high priest decides, well, 11 days not too bad, I'll wait till next year. So you throw in another 11 days, it's 22. I think I'll put now another month out there, and I'll call it 30 days, or I call it 29 days. It never gets accurate. It just bounces around on there. So we don't really focus on their calendar, not on the Hebrew calendar. The Hebrew calendar is more accurate than the Gregorian calendar.
False.
False, yeah, everybody get that, that's right. The Jewish priest adds an additional month every other year.
False.
That's right, it's false. Why is it false, somebody?
Because he does it when he wants to.
Huh?
He does it when he wants to.
Yeah, one year they may not even add a date, and the next year they may not add a date, so it could be every 3 years. You know, they just try to keep up that calendar. I don't know how many countries would use that Hebrew calendar now, probably none other than Israel. And I bet they use them side by side with the Gregorian calendar. A new Jewish day starts at sundown.
True.
Oh boy, everybody on the top of that one, yeah, that's a fact. Jesus was crucified on Friday, which just happened to be Passover. Say it out loud, Sandra.
True.
Everybody else is going, they get eyebrows down.
We know it's
Sandra
Friday,
mouthing, true. That is true. It just happened to be Passover. How do we know? Jesus was crucified on Friday. So when you go back into Thursday, when the sun went down Thursday night, it became the next day. And it just happened to be Passover, and it happened to hit a Saturday, which was their Sabbath. Doesn't always go that way.
Or did it not just happen to be?
Huh? What?
Or I said, or not, did it not happen to be? It could have been by design.
Oh, it could have been. The reason we say that the short answer to that is the first Sunday after Passover, Jesus was crucified Friday. What is that? That was Passover Day. And then the first Sunday after that Passover Day is when he arose. So do we get the right picture every time? We didn't for years, but then later we did when I don't want to say it because it's going to be a question in a minute. Watch it when it comes up. See. The Jewish holiday of Passover is always the first full moon after the fall equinox.
True.
False.
False.
Who said false?
Spring.
Okay, Carol. Why?
That's fall, we're now in spring.
That's right.
Yeah, spring.
I put fall in there and it's spring equinox.
Trick question.
Y'all trick. Well, Paul Bennett asked me one time if I would do I don't know, a recap of the lesson. He said, "Why are you going to do it? I understand it. When I go home, I can't remember what it was." So, and he wasn't here today. This is a recap. Yeah, it's the spring equinox. There is a short answer and a long answer to the question, when is Easter?
True.
True. And the short answer is the one we've been repeating in here. It's the first Sunday after Passover. Years before they made a change on this in late 1500s, they couldn't keep up with what the priest was going to do. Was he going to add a month or not add a month? And you couldn't follow that. You were waiting on the Jews to tell you when you could do Easter. And the way they finally settled that was the spring equinox could fall on one of 3 days. So they picked March 21st and said that will be the spring equinox. You might see on the calendar that says that, and it also says it on the day before or the day after, because it was a moving target. So the whole world accepted that the spring equinox is on the 29th of March. So,
21st.
21st, sorry about that. I'm trying to think over here while I'm speaking over here. Okay. We said that is true. The short answer is, if somebody asks you as a Christian, you need to be able to answer that question. When they say, well, Easter, well, one year it's in March, and another year it's in April. Why is that? And if a person hasn't been in this class and paid attention, they don't know the answer. The short answer is exactly what we got up there. That is a good answer, it's complete, but there's also a more complex answer. This is the long answer. And I'll go ahead and put the true up there so you'll know. Easter is on the first Sunday after the first full moon on or after spring equinox. It has to be right because Don's shaking his head. Back me up on this. We miss you, Don.
David too.
Yeah, that's the moving targets that you used to see. But now that the spring equinox is on the 21st, we can go ahead as Christians and decide when Easter's going to be. Easter is always after Passover. It's always on a Sunday because Jesus died on the cross on Friday and he arose on Sunday. So that we can use the longer answer, say Easter is the first Sunday after the first full moon on or after the spring equinox. And we went through 3 calendars last week, and by the time I got to the third one, you were throwing out answers before I could finish the questions. So you did really good, but I would hesitate to have you tell anybody this long answer because it seems confusing. It's hard for you and I to remember. It's hard for me to remember when I go back into the lesson again. So just keep in mind, we know that Jesus died on Friday, he arose on the Sunday, so it was the first Sunday after Passover. That's where it's going to be, and that could be a 25 to 29 day period. It could be in March or it can be in April. The key is the full moon, because we know the equinox, the spring equinox, is on the 21st. But then you'd have to look and see where's the first full moon after that. Bingo, it's right here. Well, on that's what they do Passover on that day. And so we know the following Sunday. It's a long recap, but you know, we need to kind of know. You don't need to know the long answer, but you know that the quick answer is the short one. The longer answer, tell them, well, go talk to the teacher. That's a hard one, the longer answer. The long answer should be 2 O's. Too confusing. I will just remember the short answer.
True.
Yeah, I think it is. I think that's what we need to do. We don't need to confuse the person that you're talking to. We don't need it to be wrong. That's just a simple answer that makes sense. Easter is always the first Sunday after Passover. The most important thing to remember about Easter is that Jesus died on the cross for you and I in order to cancel all of our sins.
Amen.
And then Jesus defeated death by rising from the tomb that you and I can have eternal life. You see the play on the events that takes place, both on the cross and in the tomb. So with all that, I'm ready to start today's lesson. And it's chapter 27, it's verses 1 through 26. And next Sunday we'll come back, it starts with 27 and goes to the end of the chapter. It's a real long chapter. It's like telling the life of Jesus or the last week. And you hate to stop somewhere and think you're going to come back next Sunday and do the rest of it. But 2 weeks ago, because last week I did a special lesson on Easter, but 2 weeks ago we studied about Judas being betrayed. Judas betrayed Jesus. Jesus was arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus was tried by Annas, the retired high priest. Jesus was taken to Caiaphas, the high priest. There's a connection, I may be saying in a future, another slide, but Annas, that was illegal for them to take Jesus, and they're escorted by these soldiers. He's not the high priest. He can't hold court. That's what they wanted to do. They wanted him to pronounce the death penalty on Jesus. Then they did it at nighttime. That also made it illegal. Then they went from him, then, okay, you're not the high priest. All right, we'll go over here. And Caiaphas is the high priest. And Caiaphas is the son of Annas. Then we read about Peter's denial. I know you remember that. We heard a chicken croak in the classroom. You weren't here last Sunday, you missed it. We had the chicken actually make a sound. I want us to go back and pick up the conversation where Jesus was being arrested. So you need to know where we are now. He's been through the Garden of Gethsemane. He's coming out and he's been meeting the Roman soldiers. But this time I'm going to read it from the book of John. John does a lot better writing of it than any of the four Gospels on there. In John 18, it said, meanwhile, the high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teaching. I have spoken openly to the world, Jesus replied. I always taught in the synagogues or at the temple where all the Jews come together, and I said nothing in secret. And that's an important piece there, because they're going to blame him for, or try to. They had to get some witnesses to come in and say he speaks blasphemy on there. So he says, I didn't do anything in secret, and everybody would know. So why question me? Ask those who heard me. Surely they know what I said. So now they're having a hard time. Well, what did he say that we could get him crucified for? When Jesus said this, one of the officials nearby slapped him in the face. Is this the way you answer the high priest? Jesus again, he said, if I said something wrong, testify to what is wrong. But if I spoke the truth, why did you strike me? Then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest, the reigning high priest. He said that Annas was the high priest, and he brought Jesus first to Annas, who was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the great high priest. Annas cast judgment on Jesus even though he was not the reigning high priest, and he could not legally pass this. Annas was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was the reigning high priest, so they sent So they sent Jesus to Caiaphas after going through that. So we said the first trial is by Annas. There's Caiaphas. When Caiaphas could not find a cause to have Jesus put to death, he took Jesus before the whole Sanhedrin council. Trial number 2 is with Caiaphas, the high priest. How many times was Jesus tried? Most scholars believe that Jesus was tried 7 times. So let's look at the 7. You will have some preachers say, well, no, you don't count this one or that one, so it's 6 or it's 5. It doesn't have to be that accurate. The events that take place. We say that trial number 1, it happened at nighttime, which was illegal, by Annas, the retired high priest. He had no authority. Trial number 2 is with Caiaphas, the current high priest. The third trial, he was tried by the Sanhedrin council when Caiaphas couldn't come up with something blasphemy that Jesus said. He didn't know what to do, so he called the whole Sanhedrin council, and I don't know if they're all in attendance, and we can't quite tell if that's still in the dark or it's light by now, but he had to go before the whole Sanhedrin council. The Sanhedrin council was made of scribes, Pharisees, Sadducees, and I think the number was 70 that they have on the Sanhedrin council. Well, they couldn't do anything, so they take him to Pilate, and he's tried by Pilate. And next he's tried by King Herod. We'll get to that probably not this Sunday, but next Sunday. In trial number 6, he was back to Pilate. Number 4 was Pilate. He sent him over to King Herod. King Herod tried to try him and didn't find anything, so Max back to Pilate. So who is the ones that came up with the accusations? We say he's tried by the crowd. And when Pilate was standing there, he couldn't find anything wrong. And you're going to see as we go to read that, he really doesn't want anything to do with this. He doesn't. I think he's innocent. Later on, you see he washed his hands over. So we'll see some of that as we go on now.
Well, Wallace, in your opinion, why did he have all of those trials?
Well, they
Were
went.
they unsure?
They had a hard time finding what to accuse him of. And
They
like
were
Jesus
unsure.
said, if I've said something that's wrong, tell me what it is. Nobody could tell him what it was. Now they'll finally get down to the point when he was walking away from the temple and his disciples was with him, and the disciple says, look at the magnificent temple. And he said, I tell you one thing, in the future not one stone will be setting on another. And that was what started it. They thought, oh, now we got something on him. That's blasphemy. He said that temple is going to be torn down. And it was, except for, I guess, the western wall.
I've always been told that the 7 is a significant number, meaning complete.
Yeah, it is. I had this written in my Bible. I've had 2 Bibles since then, I think, but I had this written in the cover on the inside, trial 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. And most of the time you'll see 7. Occasionally somebody doesn't count this one or doesn't count that one. It's not that important. The events are important, what follows after this. So. Early in the morning, all the chief priests and the elders of the people made their plans how to have Jesus executed. So that was in front of the Sanhedrin council. That was the third one. At that time, the Romans ruled over the Jews. They allowed the Jews to hold their own trials, but they weren't allowed to have a person executed. It had to be done by a Roman governor there. So now you see why the Pharisees wanted to take Jesus before Pontius Pilate. They couldn't pronounce a death penalty on him, but Pilate could because he's a Roman. Only the Roman governor could sentence a person to death, but there was another problem, convincing Pilate to sentence Jesus to be executed. It turned out to be no easy task. Now Matthew switches back to a conversation between Judas and the Pharisees. So we're going to talk about Jesus, and also the scene changes, and then you'll see what it was. This is going to be in the temple when Judas, who had betrayed him, saw that Jesus was condemned. He changed his mind, and he returned 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders. He said, "I have sinned, for I have betrayed innocent blood." This says, in this version it says he changed his mind. In the King James Version it says he repented. Either one are close enough to being accurate. The priest said, "What is this?" They replied, "That's your responsibility." So Judas threw the money into the temple and he left. Then he went away and he hanged himself. Question, how about Judas? Was he really confessing his sin? Do you think he died as a believer? That's an opinion question.
I do. I think he died as a believer.
As a believer?
I mean, if he's gonna take his own life, that sounds to me like he's pretty convinced.
Okay, that's a good point. Anybody else?
Yeah, I did.
Jan says she believes it.
Well,
died
he
as a
had,
believer.
that was a lot of money that he took to betray him, and he goes and throws the money back to them.
Yes.
And because he has this tremendous burden on himself, and that he could not live with, so he hanged himself.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't say he was a believer when he died. The scriptures don't tell us. Two good points that y'all made on there, that I like the one where they say that he repented.
Yeah.
And, yeah, like you said, Jan, if he'd go all the way to killing himself, I mean, he really was living in grief, and he knew. So, there's a lot about Judas. There's some books out about Judas. There's one they call it the Book of Judas that should be in the Bible, but that's just mostly opinions about Judas. I believe that when it says he repented and he went out, he threw the money back down, the silver coins, and he went out and hanged himself. Yeah, I would think he's a believer. What do we get out of that? You go in the hospital room, you go in the ICU wing, and you look at somebody that's there dying, and maybe a family member says, "He's not a believer," and then 5 minutes later he dies. Who knows what takes place right before death? When he sees a vision of Jesus, "Oh, I'm sorry." You don't know what takes place. I would never walk away and say, "That's too bad, he wasn't a believer." You know what I'm saying?
I always think of Larry's dad,
Who's?
Larry Ratliff.
Yeah.
Remember his dad? His dad was not a believer, and it always worried Larry. And then his dad died. So, and Larry believed that he still was not a believer when he died.
Yeah, that's hard on you.
Yeah, it was hard on him for years and years,
Well,
because he would bring it up in
Yeah.
class.
yeah, he was burdened with that. But see, we have no right to tell somebody, okay, he died, and he never professed his sins, he didn't say he believed in Jesus. What you and I don't know, that when they're going out, it looks like there's a time period that maybe they do speak to God. And that's the way I would believe on any of it. I believe God gives them a chance. And right at death, I believe they're going to see things, and they're going to be in eternity. So I don't know that the Bible gives us the answer to that. That's one of those where we can assume, we don't like that word, but we can assume that it looks like that he was a believer. The chief priest picked up the coins and said, "It is against the law to put this into the treasury, since it is blood money." So they decided to use the money to buy the potter's field as a burying place for foreigners. That is why it has been called the Field of Blood to this day. of Potter's Field. This was a cemetery that's on the outskirts of Jerusalem. It was used to bury the poor and the foreigners. So when Jesus was placed in a tomb, it was owned by somebody else, but they gave him the tomb. A lot of these don't get that. If they're poor, if they're from another country, they call it a potter's field, and it's hard to understand, but there was a certain part of the land just outside of Jerusalem that type of dirt or clay, which potters used it, so it got a nickname. But they took that field, the chief priest evidently bought more to it because there was already part of it there. And people that don't have money to be put in a tomb, they will drag them out to the potter's field. And so that'd be the poor people and the foreigners.
When you went to Israel, did you see that?
No, we didn't. It wasn't even mentioned. So there's so many things to talk about
Yeah,
when we're
I
over there.
know, but I just thought that would be, that
It seemed like
comes
it
right out
would
of
be
the
something
Bible.
there. Yeah, it seemed like it would be someplace they'd take us by and see that. So the Pharisees called this money is blood money, therefore they couldn't put it in the temple treasury. And they made all these little rules and stuff. I don't think something like that came from Moses. You know, first it's the 10 Commandments that God gave. Then he went on and gave a whole lot more to Moses to govern the people with. And the blood money, I don't know that there's anything for that. I think sometimes the Pharisees want to be prompt and they just, oh no, you can't do that, and throw it out in the field. Then what was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet was fulfilled. They took 30 pieces of silver, the price set on him by the people of Israel, and they used them to buy the potter's field as the Lord had commanded. And that's taken from Zechariah and from Jeremiah where they did this. Here's what it looks like in Zechariah. And he said, I told them, if you think it is best, give me my pay, but if not, keep it. So they paid me 30 pieces of silver. And it had funny how 30 pieces of silver was spoken of way back in the Old Testament. And then we get into the New Testament and we read about Judas, 30 pieces of silver. And the Lord said to me, and this is Zechariah, throw it in the potter's field. Isn't that amazing? The handsome price at which they valued me. So I took the 30 pieces of silver and I threw it into the potter at the house of the Lord. Now Matthew's going to leave this conversation between Judas and the Pharisees. Now he goes back to the conversation with Jesus going before Pilate. Meanwhile, Jesus stood before the governor, Pontius Pilate, and the governor asked him, are you the king of the Jews? Jesus answered, you have said so. He didn't give anybody the chance to say, that's blasphemy. He said, you say it. Clever. Trial number 4 with Pilate. When he was accused by the chief priests and the elders, he gave no answer. Then Pilate asked him, don't you hear the testimony they are bringing against you? But Jesus made no reply, not even a single charge, to the great amazement of the governor. Underline the great amazement of the governor. You got to think, Pilate, he's not welcome to get involved in this. I'll show you why in a minute. Do you see where Pilate is kind of between a rock and a hard place? Your mom ever tell you that? Between a rock and a hard place? I don't know why that came to my mind, but that's where Pilate was. He trying to find a way to escape this thing. He turned and looked at Jesus and he said, don't you hear the testimony they're bringing against you? Pilate was amazed, and that's what we'd underline there. Pilate was amazed that Jesus was so calm and did not say a word in his own defense. Now back in Matthew, it said, now it was the governor's custom at the festival to release a prisoner chosen by the crowd. At that time, they had a well-known prisoner whose name was Barabbas. So when the crowd had gathered, Pilate asked, "Which one do you want me to release? Jesus Barabbas or Jesus you call the Messiah?" For he knew it was out of self-control that they had handed him over to him. The Passover was the feast that they were talking about. It's on Friday morning. Now, believe it or not, Jesus was actually a pretty common Jewish name in the first century. Did you know Jesus the Messiah? Jesus Barabbas. Look at this. 1 out of 11, and in those days, 1 out of 11 Jewish males was named Jesus. 1 out of 11. Jesus, in the Greek, it meant Yahshua or Joshua. In the Hebrew, it means Yahweh, meaning God saves. Now, Pilate was sure that the crowd would not want to release a deadly criminal. Pilate just knew they would choose Jesus to be released, but things were not looking so good. While Pilate was sitting on the judge's seat, his wife sent to him this message: "Don't have anything to do with that innocent man, for I have suffered a great deal today in a dream because of him." That's God stirring up the water, isn't it? Through Pilate's wife. Wow, made it tough on him. But the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas and to have Jesus executed. Years ago, when we were living in Richardson, it was during the 1970s. My 2 daughters were teenagers then, and Laurie, the one that passed away a couple of years ago, they were going to do kind of like a play about the death of Jesus. Her part and 2 other girls were to hand insults to Jesus on the cross. And she said that's the hardest thing she ever done.
Yes.
You put out, "You're not the Messiah," and all these insults. She said, that was hard to do, you know. And I thought, well, yeah, especially for a young girl, you know. But she said, I really didn't like that part on there. Yeah, I understand. Very little is known about Pontius Pilate's wife, except that she was a Roman, she was well educated, she was wealthy, and the wife of the Roman governor Pontius Pilate at that time of Jesus' death. Many scholars believe that she knew a lot about the Jewish religion, and some they're split on this. Some say, well, I think she was a Jewish person. Well, we don't know that. So I said, well, you know, and maybe she just studied somewhere and learned about the Jews. Well, I know that King Herod the Great was not a believer of the Jewish religion, but yet he built the temple, rebuilt Solomon's temple on there. So we don't know how she got this knowledge about the Jewish religion and the fact that Jesus would send somebody to speak to her. Which of the 2 do you want to release? Asked the governor. Barabbas, they answered. What shall I do with them? And Jesus, who was called the Messiah, they all answered, crucify him. So it backlashed on him. He thought they'd say, you know, release Jesus because we don't want this murderer to go loose. But they didn't. It went the other way. So now he's still between that rock and a hard place. What's the main duty of a Roman governor anyway?
Keep the peace.
Who said that? Yeah. Keep the peace. There's more to it too, but that's their number one job. To keep the peace and to keep the Jews from starting an uprising. That's why the soldiers were there. We want them to get together and try to take their land back. So he had the Roman soldiers there with him, but the main duty, he was just keep things quiet on there. Pontius Pilate was given the land of Judea to govern the south, and we've read something about King Herod earlier, and I said that's going to be a trial. But and King Herod was given the land of Galilee to the north. King Herod was the governor over the land of Galilee in the north. He was also called Herod Antipas, and he was one of the sons of King Herod the Great. He had 4 sons, and he executed 2 of them, his own sons. So he gave this job, if you want to call it that, a Roman governor over Galilee. So now that plays an important part, because here's Pilate thinking, how can I get out of this? Oh, and you're from Galilee? Oh, good. Then you have to go before King Herod, not me. See, that's where he's heading. He's trying to get that done. And he does. We will hear a little bit more about Herod Antipas in this chapter. But they shouted out the louder, "Crucify him," when Pilate saw that he was getting nowhere, but that instead an uproar was starting. He doesn't want that to happen. He took water and he washed his hands in front of the crowd. "I am innocent of this man's blood." He said, "It is your responsibility. I don't want anything to do with that." Now, Pontius Pilate didn't want an uproar of the people to get started, but he knew if he did not give Jesus the death sentence, surely the people would start a riot and he would lose his job. He's looking for a way out. I think that between his wife's warning and the fact that he could not see any wrongdoings of Jesus, Pilate wanted no blame for what happens to Jesus. So Pilate made sure that he was not the one condemning Jesus and that his blood was not on his hands, but on the hands of the people. He said, "I wash my hands of the only thing to do with it." He took water and he washed his hands in front of the crowd. "I'm innocent of this man's blood." He said, "It's your responsibility." All the people answered, "His blood is on us, on our children." Then he released Barabbas to them, but he had Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified. Trial number 5. Why do you think Pilate had Jesus flogged? It's an opinion question because it executed. Why flog him?
To appease the crowd.
I think, okay, it's a good answer. Anybody else? Yeah, I agree. That's what it was happening here. He wanted to show them that, okay, I'm giving in to you, that there would be an uprising somewhere. But I just thought it was odd that he said, "Here he is, take him to the cross." But he had him flogged. I don't know if he did that hoping that would satisfy the people and not have to execute him. Our verses stop here for today. And I hate to stop in the middle of something like this, but next Sunday we'll start with verse 27, chapter 27. The subjects will be the following. Next week, the soldiers that mocked Jesus. That's what my daughter had to do. The crucifixion of Jesus. The death of Jesus. The burial of Jesus. The guard at the tomb. I got 6 minutes left. You know I'm not going to let you out. I always put something down here that if I finish early, bring it back up. I call it a happy moment. Well, what happened to it?
5 years ago, we never imagined that she would be here today. When Angelica was 4 years old, she started coughing and having fevers. We brought her into the emergency room, and that's when we found out she had double pneumonia, and her kidneys stopped working.
Sweet creature.
Things were getting really bad really fast. They brought in a chaplain to talk with us.
We thought that we're about to lose her.
Don't know where we're going.
What saved her life is she got her kidney transplant from her mother.
But what did Mommy give you? Oh, Mommy gave you her kidney. Oh, that's so sweet.
She's my hero.
It's her dream to become a singer. Her being here today is a miracle.
If I won America's Got Talent, I would get a puppy. I would get a puppy. Like a small tiny puppy. Let's go.
Good evening. Hi. What's your name?
My name is Angelica Hale.
And where are you from?
I'm from Atlanta, Georgia.
How old are you?
I'm 9 years old. And I just found out that I'm gonna be a big sister.
Just throw that in.
What do you want to be like?
I wanna be the next Whitney Houston.
Wow.
I want to be a superstar.
Wow.
And I'm so happy to be here because, like, I've been watching your show on YouTube, and now I feel like I'm in it, and I'm like so awesome.
And not only are you in it, you're in it
To
to
win it.
go ahead, Angelica.
Okay.
Win it for yourself.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Whitney Houston.
You're broken down and tired. Living life on a merry-go-round, and you can't find the fighter. But I see it in you, so we're gonna walk it out and move mountains. We're gonna walk it out and move. And I'll rise up and say, I'll rise unafraid, I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. For you,
Can you believe that over 9 years?
and we'll do it 1,000 times again. For you, for you,
Simon, talk to her. Well, this shouldn't actually happen. You're tiny, your voice is huge.
I have a feeling we may be looking at a star in the future.
Wow, I had goosebumps everywhere. You're a clever little girl, and you said you want to be a superstar. I think that might happen for you. Let me tell you. You are so special, and your voice is so amazing. Thank you so much for sharing this with us today.
By the way, Mel B, you're my favorite judge.
car a while, and I just thought, you know, don't you like to sit there once in a while and see something like this, you know?
It's amazing.
You could just pull for her. They thought she was gonna die, kidney failure. And look what you got now.
You gotta say,
Huh?
couldn't let that die.
You know. When I was 9, I used to sing like that. What's so funny? Maybe I didn't, maybe I didn't. I better retract that. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Father, I thank you for the people that came in here today to hear your word. Lord, that we know, or maybe we don't know, how bad it was for Jesus, the suffering he went through. But Lord, that kind of suffering's going on now in Ukraine. And we want to pray for those people over there, that you would bless them and help them get this thing over with. Pray for the people in Poland that are trying to take care of all these that are running for their lives. Lord, give strength to those people in Poland as well. And to the people in here and myself, we pray you would watch over us and take care of us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Amen.